The morning sun had not yet risen when the call to prayer echoed through Makena town, a small but growing city in eastern Africa. The streets were still wet from the night rain, and mist hovered over the ground like a ghost refusing to leave. Vendors were slowly opening their stalls. Roosters crowed from behind rusted corrugated iron fences. Taxi drivers yawned as they stretched beside their bright blue matatus. Not far from the bustling market lived Amina Njeri, a 34-year-old widow known for her kindness and strong will. Her house was small and aging, but spotless, with bright yellow curtains that fluttered in the breeze like hopeful wings. Every morning she brewed strong Kenyan chai, sprinkled with ginger and cinnamon, even when sugar was too expensive to afford. She would often say to herself, "If there is tea, there is strength." That morning, Amina stepped outside carrying a basket of vegetables to sell at the market. The first winds of July's cold season had arrived early. She wrapped herself in a thick green shawl made of kitenge fabric, the last gift from her late husband, Otieno. It carried his scent even after 6 years. She never washed it completely, afraid to lose that memory forever. Makena town was slowly waking up. Young boys chased chickens between houses. Women with wide hips and bright dresses balanced buckets of water on their heads. Boda motorcycles zipped through potholes and puddles like determined insects. The city was loud and chaotic, yet full of life. At the corner of Kisumu Road and Bahati Street, Amina stopped. There, beside a closed hardware store, crouched a beggar. He was wrapped in old sacks and newspaper pieces, shivering like a child in fear. His beard was gray and tangled. His eyes were closed, lips pale. Others passed by quickly, pretending not to see him. Amina stared for a long moment. She felt her heart break. He looked close to dying. She stepped toward him gently. "Baba, are you all right?" she asked in Swahili. Only a faint breath came from him. His hands were turning blue. Amina looked around. The wind was cold and cruel. She remembered her own hardest nights, after her husband died in a construction accident, leaving her with nothing but debts and a little girl to raise. She remembered those days when she prayed for someone, anyone, to show kindness. Most didn't. But she survived, and because she survived, she believed kindness must be kept alive. Without thinking further, she removed her shawl. Her hands trembled, not from the wind now, but from memories. Slowly, she wrapped the shawl around the beggar's shoulders. His eyes opened halfway. He stared at her, surprised. "You will freeze," he whispered weakly. "I have survived worse," she replied with a soft smile. He stared at her as though searching for words. But he said nothing. Nothing at all. Amina whispered, "I'll bring you tea. Do not go anywhere." She hurried toward the market, her bare arms freezing under the harsh wind. Yet her heart felt strangely warm. That day at the market, Amina struggled. She shivered all morning as she arranged tomatoes and onions for sale. Her neighbors scolded her gently. "You gave your shawl to a beggar? Amina, are you trying to become a beggar too?" But Amina only smiled. "God sees all things," she said. Yet by afternoon, she began to regret it, not because of the cold, but because when she went back to the street, the beggar was gone. And so was her shawl. She stood there, confused and disappointed. Maybe he wasn't really in need. Maybe he had tricked her. Her heart sank, but she told herself, perhaps kindness should not look for reward. She turned to go home, shivering once more. That evening, Amina walked back through the dusty streets of town. The sky was turning rose gold, and smoke from cooking fires filled the air. Children laughed in the distance, and a group of teenagers danced to Afrofusion music from a cafe speaker. But Amina walked slowly, her steps heavy. People always took from her. Sellers overcharged her. Customers haggled until she made almost no profit. Once, a cousin had borrowed money and disappeared. Now, even the shawl that held the memory of her husband was gone. But she repeated, "If I still have kindness, I am still rich." She arrived home to find her daughter Zuri, now 11 years old, sweeping the doorstep. Zuri looked at her mother's shoulders and immediately frowned. "Where is Baba's shawl?" Amina sat beside her. She explained everything: the freezing beggar, the moment of compassion, the shawl wrapped around him like a final prayer. Silence filled their tiny house. Zuri didn't speak for a long time. Then she said softly, "Mama, you cry with smiles." "Always." Tears finally escaped Amina's eyes. That night, the cold was cruel. They slept close, wrapped in one blanket, shivering. Outside, stray dogs barked at distant thunder. A storm was coming, and perhaps within Amina's heart too. Days passed. The beggar never returned. Some mocked her for trusting strangers. Others called her Amina wa Moyo Lani, Amina of the soft heart. She worked harder than ever, selling vegetables, cleaning houses, washing clothes. Every day her hands burned from the cold water. Her back ached from lifting heavy buckets. But she did not break. Then, 1 week later, everything changed. It was a Friday afternoon. The air was unusually still. McKenna town seemed to pause, as if holding its breath. Amina was selling oranges when 2 black Mercedes cars pulled up near her stall. Expensive suits stepped out, lawyers. Real ones. People watched in awe. One of them approached her. "Are you Amina Njeri?" Her heart skipped. "Yes, why?" "Someone has requested your presence." "Immediately." "Who?" "He said you would understand when you saw him." Amina looked around in confusion. The vendors had gathered, whispering. Some thought she was in trouble. Some thought she was being arrested. She feared the worst. Maybe something about debt? Land dispute? Someone had framed her? Zuri grabbed her hand tightly. "Mama, don't go," she pleaded. But the lawyer simply bowed politely. "We are not police, madam. We are here to deliver something to you." Amina hesitated. But something inside her whispered, "Trust again." She followed them. They arrived at Hillcrest Hotel, the most expensive place in the region. Amina felt completely out of place with her worn sandals and faded dress. The marble floors shone so brightly she could see her reflection. Inside a private lounge sat the beggar. Clean. Shaven. Wearing a perfectly tailored gray suit. But his eyes, those eyes, were the same. She froze. He stood up slowly. "I owe you a word," he said. The lawyers laid a stack of land ownership papers on the table. "And a key. To a house." Everyone was silent. The beggar, now no longer a beggar, looked straight at her. "My name is Elias Mwangi," he spoke clearly. "I own land in 3 counties, and several businesses. But last week, I almost chose to end everything." A gasp swept across the room. "I went to the streets wearing nothing but rags. I wanted to see if the world still had kindness, at least one person who gave without expecting anything. Everyone ignored me. Except you." He stared at her deeply, voice trembling. "You didn't just give me your shawl. You gave me a reason to live." Amina felt her heart pounding inside her chest. He continued, "I came back with lawyers, because gifts from the heart deserve recognition from the world." He pushed the documents toward her. "This land and this house are now yours. They are legally transferred. No tricks. No traps." Amina shook her head, stunned. I cannot accept this." He smiled. "It is already done. The land is in your name. Check the papers." Tears fell, real, unstoppable tears. Zuri buried her face in her mother's clothes and cried softly. "I prayed to be shown whether goodness still exists," Elias said. "You are that answer." In silence, everyone felt something change in the air. Hope became visible. But far beyond the luxury walls of the hotel, there were people already preparing jealousy. Others felt betrayed by fate, thinking, "Why her? Why not us?" Hope often arrives with the shadow of envy. And destiny never walks a straight line. The story had only begun. The news spread faster than wildfire in the dry season. Within a day, McKenna Town was buzzing. Amina wa Moyo Laney had become Amina the Lucky Woman. Some congratulated her with joy, but others with tight smiles and sharper tongues. Mungu ana upand wake, some whispered. God is on her side. She must have used charms, others muttered in darker corners. Amina felt the shift in the wind. People no longer looked at her the same way. Respect had arrived, but so had suspicion. The same people who used to walk past her stall ignoring her prices now stepped carefully around her, speaking softly, as though she had suddenly become royalty or a ticking bomb. The next morning, she woke before sunrise. She stared at the land papers on her wooden table. She had read them more than 10 times, tracing the edge with her finger like a child touching a new toy. Zuri slept beside her, a peaceful child still dreaming in a house that had known both hunger and hope with equal measure. Amina whispered to herself, "Is this real life?" There was a knock at the door. Not once, but 3 times, firm and slow. Amina hesitated before opening it. Standing outside was Elias, without lawyers this time. He wore a simple shirt and slacks, yet he had dignity in every step he took. His eyes were deeper now, calmer. "May I enter?" he asked. Amina nodded and offered him tea. He held the cup gently, as though it were sacred. "I need to explain something," he said. Amina sat quietly, waiting. "I was once like you, struggling, waking before sunrise to fight for bread. Until life took a turn, I moved to Nairobi, studied, worked in real estate, rose to wealth. But wealth began to poison me." His gaze drifted. People smiled only at my money. Friends turned to vultures. My brother betrayed me. My wife left me and took part of my company with her. I began to wonder, what if kindness no longer existed? What if it was dead? He paused, voice shaking slightly. I thought, maybe if I disguise myself and go to the streets, I would see the truth of this world. And I saw it. Coldness. Greed. People stepping around me like dirt. My heart broke. He looked at her. Then you came, wrapped your shawl around me, without asking why I was there, without asking my name. That shawl, he swallowed, emotion rising, that shawl was warmer than all my wealth. Amina's eyes were moist. She spoke softly, I did it, because I once prayed for someone to show me kindness too. But most never did. They exchanged silence, not empty, but meaningful. Suddenly, Zuri entered, sleepy-eyed, holding her small school bag. Elias smiled at her. Good morning, princess. Zuri tilted her head. Are you the rich beggar? She asked innocently. Elias laughed gently. I suppose I am. Amina felt embarrassed. Zuri, she scolded. But Elias only knelt and placed his hand over his heart. That title is better than being just rich. Riches change every season, but a heart can remain warm forever. Zuri nodded. She trusted him instantly. But not everyone would. The land visit. Amina went with Elias to see the land, a wide stretch just beyond McKenna Town. The soil was rich, black as night after rain. There were mango trees scattered like silent guards, and the wind smelled like new beginnings. Zuri ran around laughing as Elias walked with Amina slowly. It is yours, he said. Use it well. She felt overwhelmed. I don't know where to begin. Begin from the heart, he replied. Just as they were walking back, voices echoed behind them. A group of villagers approached, faces tight, eyes suspicious. Among them was Wanjiru, Amina's childhood friend who had grown distant over the years. Another was Mr. Baraka, a local elder known for making trouble when jealousy bit him. Wanjiru stared at Elias. You say you are a businessman. Show us proof. Mr. Baraka grunted. We know this land. It belonged to a certain Mwangi family years ago. You say you are Mwangi. Did you steal the documents? Elias stepped forward calmly. I have nothing to hide. One man whispered, This land used to be disputed. Some say it carries curses. Elias nodded. Yes. My family abandoned it after many problems. I left it untouched for years. But I believe it can be reborn, with the right hands. Mr. Baraka looked at Amina. And why her? You couldn't find your own relatives. Amina felt the sting. Even Wanjiru's eyes were filled with something painful, perhaps betrayal, perhaps longing, perhaps envy. Elias spoke firmly, because kindness should always be rewarded. You may dislike her fortune, but tell me, who among you helped someone without expecting payment? Who gives without wanting more? Silence answered him. He continued, I did not come to boast. I came to repay a debt of the soul. They said nothing more. But as the villagers walked away, Wanjiru turned and whispered to Amina, Blessings attract storms. Be ready, sister. The village council. Later that week, Amina was called to a community baraza, a traditional council meeting. She sat among village elders beneath an acacia tree, facing dozens of locals. Some smiled. Others glared. The village chief, Mzee Kato, rose to speak. He was old, wise, and respected. Change is like rain, he said. It can nourish, but also flood. Today we gather to discuss new land ownership. Our sister Amina has received land from Mr. Elias, who claims rightful ownership. We must determine whether this land can be transferred without dispute. Murmurs filled the air. Elias stood and presented documents. Everything is legal. The government has already approved the ownership transfer to her. A man shouted, What if she builds and sells the land to outsiders? What if she brings investors from the big city? We will lose our land. Amina stood, voice steady. I have no intention to sell. I want to farm. Maybe build a school. Maybe open a market for villagers. If my rising hurts you, then it is not me who hurts you, but jealousy itself. The chief raised his hand. Silence fell. He studied Amina closely. Do you promise this land will not divide us, but unite us? Amina swallowed, eyes glistening. I promise. My feet are still muddy. My hands are still tired. I am not above anyone. I only want to rise, and lift others too. The chief nodded. Some villagers clapped. Others frowned. But the council gave approval. As Amina and Elias walked away, clouds gathered overhead. Today, he said, you won half a battle. And the other half, she asked. That one is fought in silence, against doubt, fear, and betrayal. The silent romance. Days turned into weeks. Elias visited often, not just about the land, but about life. They sat under trees discussing dreams. He bought seeds. She bought tools. Together, they began a small farm, beans, spinach, sukuma wiki, and maize. But a feeling began to grow, a soft, unspoken tenderness. Not loud, not flashy, just quiet understanding. When Elias smiled, Amina's heart felt lighter. When Amina talked, Elias listened like a man who found meaning again. Zuri loved him most. She often said, Mama, Mr. Elias is not like other men. When he looks, he sees. Was it love? Amina did not dare think so. But it felt like sunrise after a long night. One evening, under fading light, Elias said, Sometimes God puts two broken people together, not to complete each other, but to rebuild something new. Amina looked at him, searching his eyes. They held each other's gaze a moment too long. But happiness in Africa often walks with caution, because someone is always watching. Betrayal begins. Someone was indeed watching. Wanjiru, once her closest friend, felt jealousy burn inside her like acid. She lived with her husband, a drunk who cursed her daily. She looked at Amina and thought, how did life choose her? Why not me? She began to gossip. Elias gives her land. Next he will give her marriage. She has bewitched him. Rumors spread again. The village air grew colder. Some stopped greeting Amina. Some raised prices when she shopped at the market. One day, her vegetable stall was vandalized. Tomatoes smashed. Eggs broken. Only a note left. Your kindness bought your luck. But kindness will not protect you forever. Elias insisted on helping her rebuild. She refused, saying, "If I rely too much on your strength, I will forget my own." That night, Amina cried silently. Zuri held her and whispered, "One day, Mama, our tears will become water for our garden." Amina kissed her forehead. "You speak like a queen." A visit to the past. One Sunday, Elias said, "There is someone I want you to meet." They traveled to a small village 2 hours away. There they visited his old family home, abandoned yet elegant. It seemed like a memory trapped in time. Inside the quiet sitting room sat Mama Aking, Elias's mother, frail but dignified. She observed Amina and nodded slowly. "She is the one?" she asked. "Yes," Elias replied softly. The old woman smiled. God answers prayers in strange ways. Mama Aking held Amina's hand. "My son was drowning in his own wealth. You gave him life again. A woman who can save a man's heart can also save his destiny." Those words stayed with Amina. Was she meant to be his partner? Or just his savior? Could she accept love again after so much loss? Before leaving the house, Elias showed her a room, full of old photographs. One picture showed a man beside a tractor, smiling with pride. "That was my father," Elias said. Amina looked closely. "He looks like a good man." He was. Until poverty after drought swallowed our dreams. My mother struggled. I left the village to build a future. But sometimes I wonder if she needed me more than I needed success. Amina's eyes softened. Family is not measured in money, but in presence. He looked at her gently. "Is that why you never remarried?" She hesitated. "Yes, and because I was afraid to trust again." He nodded. "Fear protects us, but also imprisons us." She looked out the window. Perhaps some prisons need their doors opened. He held her gaze again. Soft, respectful, hopeful. Something was changing. Village wedding rumors. They returned to McKenna town. Gossip had intensified. People were now saying, "Elias will marry her. Her fortune comes from beauty. She planned it all. Clever widow." Even the church women began to whisper behind her back. Pity had turned to envy. Envy had turned to bitterness. But Amina kept her dignity like a cloak of invisible strength. Until one night, jealousy became revenge. As she and Zuri slept, a stone crashed through the window. Smoke followed. Someone had thrown burning cloth soaked in kerosene. Fire spread quickly. Zuri screamed. Amina grabbed a bucket, threw water, and fought the flames with her bare hands. A neighbor came running and helped extinguish it. But the message had been sent. Elias heard the news and arrived running, face pale with fear. When he saw her blistered hands, tears filled his eyes. "This is because of me," he said, voice breaking. "No," she replied. "This is because goodness challenges evil, and evil does not fight gently." He said nothing, but his hands shook. His eyes darkened, not with fear, but with anger. The next morning, Elias made a vow. "Standing on the land he gave her," he said, "I will protect this land, and I will protect you, whether as your friend or as something more. I will not retreat." Amina listened. Her heart beat like a drum before rain. She felt love and fear together, because hope is always strongest before being tested. But far away, beneath the shadow of mango trees, Wanjiru listened and smiled bitterly. The real battle had just begun. The air around McKenna town grew heavy, like the scent of rain before a storm. People talked in hushed tones whenever Amina passed. Some pitied her. Some envied her. Others wished her downfall silently. In Africa, pain is not always shouted, it can be whispered through smiles. 2 weeks had passed since the fire incident. Amina's hands had healed, but her spirit still felt fragile, like a cracked pot held together by hope. Yet every morning, she returned to the new land with Elias and Zuri, tending the soil with determination. Their small farm began to show signs of life, sprouting maize, green vegetables, and a line of cassava seedlings bowing gently in the wind. One evening, as the sun melted into orange and gold across the sky, Elias brought a gift, a new shawl, just like before. Same fabric, same pattern, same shade of deep green. Amina held it silently. Her eyes softened with emotion. "You remembered," she whispered. "It wasn't just a shawl," he replied. "It was sacrifice. And memory. I only wished to return both to you." She touched the fabric gently. Then she looked at him long, deeply. "You have given me more than I could ever have asked for," she said. He looked at her earnestly. "Maybe I can give more." Their eyes met in silence. But just as hearts drew close, footsteps approached, villagers. Curious. Watching. Whispering. Elias looked at them, then at her. He lowered his voice. "Amina, what people say does not define us. But it can make life hard. Tell me, do you fear their words?" She thought for a moment. "I have feared everything in my life: poverty, loneliness, hunger, rejection. But the only thing I fear now is pretending not to feel something that is already alive in my heart." Elias's breath caught slightly. He turned his face away, hiding the trembling in his eyes. But love, like sunrise, cannot be hidden for long. The wedding question. A few days later, Elias asked Chief Cato for permission to call a community gathering. People expected arguments, land issues, maybe even legal disputes. Instead, Elias stood before everyone, steady as a baobab tree, and spoke clearly. "I have given this land to Amina because she reminded me that kindness still lives. But now, I wish to ask her something more." The crowd murmured and leaned forward. Some women covered their mouths. The elders sat upright, sensing something momentous. Elias turned to Amina. She stood still, surprised yet composed. "Amina," he said, voice deep and warm, "I came to this town searching for reason. You gave me purpose. I arrived without hope, and found it in your eyes. So today I ask, will you allow me to walk beside you, not only in land matters, but in life?" Gasps went across the gathering like a wave. Women held their breaths. Some men frowned. Some villagers clapped quietly. Wanjiru's eyes burned with fury. But Amina stood silent, like a warrior facing a choice greater than battle. She looked at Elias. Slowly, she smiled. Her voice was soft, but strong. "I will not answer today," she said. "I want to think deeply, because this decision is not for excitement, but for destiny." The village chief nodded in respect. Wisdom speaks through patience. The meeting ended. People returned to their homes, but their discussions filled the night air like drumbeats. Some praised them for courage. Others cursed them for arrogance. Wanjiru returned home shaking with rage. She stared at her reflection in the cracked mirror. "Always her, always Amina," she whispered. "What does she have that I don't?" Her husband stumbled in, drunk as usual. He raised his hand to slap her, but she pushed it away. "Enough," she said, eyes fierce. "I will no longer take this life. If I cannot rise with grace, then I will rise with fire." And fire, she plotted. Amina's confusion. That night, Amina sat alone in her small house. Zuri had already slept. Shadows flickered on the walls. She stared at the shawl Elias gave her. It felt warm, safe, loving. But doubt crept in like a thief. What if people judge him because of me? What if marrying me destroys his respect? What if happiness is not meant for me? She whispered. She poured tea and stared at the steam. It reminded her of her late husband. She imagined his voice in the wind. If someone values your heart, trust them. Amina closed her eyes as tears escaped. She prayed silently, asking for guidance. She didn't need wealth. She didn't seek fame. All she wanted was peace. The betrayal. At midnight, while Amina prayed, someone slipped through her farm, cutting seedlings, destroying baby crops. The next morning, Amina stood frozen in disbelief. The cassava was uprooted. The bean plants were slashed. It looked like a battlefield. Zuri cried, "Mama, why would someone do this?" Amina held her close. Because some hearts suffer when others find happiness. Elias arrived moments later. Rage rose in his eyes like a storm. "This is not mischief," he said. "This is sabotage." "Who would do such a thing?" Amina asked. Footprints were found. Shoes worn by a woman. Familiar shoe size. Amina's heart dropped. She knew. Wanjiru. Elias clenched his fists. "I will take this to court." But Amina shook her head. "No. Let the land speak. Let time reveal the truth. If we fight with anger, we become the ones we oppose." Elias looked at her with admiration. Yet his heart struggled. Justice burned in him like fire. Perhaps fire would soon burn everything. The confession. Days later, Wanjiru appeared at Amina's door, face pale, eyes red. She confessed everything, destroying the crops, spreading rumors, even encouraging others to boycott Amina's stall. "I hated seeing you rise when I was sinking," she whispered. "I felt life had chosen you instead of me. And I lost control." Amina stared at her, hurt, disappointed, but not surprised. Amina finally spoke. "You destroyed my farm, but worse, you destroyed our friendship." Wanjiru sobbed. "I never meant it to go this far." Amina closed her eyes. Sin never starts big. It starts with a seed. Wanjiru expected hatred, curses, maybe even revenge. Instead, Amina said quietly, "I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. You must rebuild what you broke." Wanjiru nodded slowly. "I will work on the farm. Every day, until the crops stand again." Amina agreed. They shook hands, one broken by guilt, the other bruised by betrayal. The sun, for the first time in weeks, shone gently on McKenna town. The answer. That evening, as sunset kissed the hills, Elias and Amina walked through the revived fields. Wanjiru worked silently in the distance, planting seeds, this time for healing. Amina spoke softly. "I have thought about your question." Elias stopped walking. His heart began to race. "And?" She looked at the sky, blue fading to gold. "I realized something. My fear of being loved was stronger than my pain of being lonely. But I am tired of fear. I have carried it like luggage across too many years." Elias listened, breath held. She turned to him. "I don't want to be rescued. I want to walk beside someone. Not ahead. Not behind. With equal steps." Elias nodded slowly. "That is all I ever hoped for." Amina took a deep breath. Then smiled. "My answer is, yes." Elias exhaled long and deep, like a man set free from chains. His eyes filled with warmth. He did not rush to hold her. He respected the moment. He simply whispered, "Asante, Malkia wa Moyo, thank you, Queen of Hearts." They stood under the fading light. Wind brushed through the maize leaves like a choir of whispers. The future was uncertain. But their hearts were no longer lonely. A new threat. But while love grew, darkness watched from afar. A man in a suit sat in a black car, binoculars in hand. He whispered into his phone. She accepted his proposal. "They are getting stronger." The voice on the other end replied coldly, "Then we must move quickly. That land holds value, more than they know. Tell the company board we will offer to buy it. If they refuse, we'll take it another way." The man in the car nodded, eyes fixed on the field. "Understood." The call ended. His gaze hardened. This land will not belong to them for long. Love had finally found a home. But greed was ready to knock at the door. The next chapter. would test everything. The rain that night in Kampala felt different. Softer, lighter, almost as if the sky itself knew that a story was coming to an end. Aisha stood at the window of her hotel room, watching the droplets trace delicate lines across the glass. Tomorrow was her court day. Tomorrow, her fate would be decided, again. But tonight she felt calm for the first time in years. Kajida ku kamu nyabo? Are you feeling calm, madam? Came the voice of Namyasok, her helper, from the door. Aisha smiled faintly. Calm, yes, but my heart still carries thunder. Namyasok nodded with deep respect. Thunder can be good. Thunder makes people listen. Aisha turned back to the window and spoke in a quiet voice. I have been thinking, what will happen when all of this is done? When I finally win, or even if I lose? The young girl stayed silent for a moment, then said, You will go home, build your land, and show people that kindness is not stupidity. Aisha almost cried hearing those words. The courtroom. One last fight. The next day, the courtroom was full. Local news stations were already reporting. Village woman takes on big developers. Beggar turned wealthy advocate returns to fight for kindness. She walked into the courtroom wearing a simple African gomesi dress, deep blue with golden patterns. She didn't want to look rich or poor, just real. At the defense table sat the land developers, wealthy men dressed in shiny suits, whispering confidently. Behind Aisha sat Mama Helena, the man who was once a beggar, now known as Mr. Isaac Mugabe, the lawyers, the villagers, and even some people who didn't know her personally but came because they believed in her story. Isaac leaned and whispered, Breathe, today your spirit must stay strong. Aisha nodded. She remembered her father's words, A woman's strength is not in how much she fights, but in how long she stands when everyone else sits down. The judge arrived, a tall African man with kind eyes yet a strict tone. Proceed. The defense lawyers began their speech. They talked for almost an hour. They argued that Aisha was emotionally manipulated by the so-called beggar, that she didn't understand legal procedures, that rural people often overreact due to cultural instincts, and that land belongs to whoever uses it most efficiently, not sentimentally. Their words stung deeply. Then came Isaac's turn. He stood slowly and walked to the center of the courtroom. The hall went silent. He began in Luganda. Sometimes, a person gives you something without expecting anything back. In Africa, this is sacred. We do not forget it. That woman gave me warmth when I had none. She gave me a shawl when I had nothing to give her. He then turned to the judge. Your Honor, a land without kindness is just soil. But with kindness, it becomes a home. The courtroom grew emotional. Even some from the defendant's side lowered their eyes. When it was Aisha's turn to speak, her hands trembled slightly. But her voice was strong. In my village, we share food even when we have little. We help strangers because we might be strangers ourselves one day. They think I gave too much, but actually, I received more than I ever imagined. I did not give a shawl. I gave hope. And somehow, hope found its way back to me. Silence. Then a slow clap echoed. The judge banged the gavel gently. Order. This is court, not a theater. But, he paused, looking directly at Aisha, such words remind us why justice exists. After several hours of questioning, reviewing documents, visiting the land records, the judge returned. Everyone held their breath. He read slowly. After reviewing all evidence, witness accounts, transaction records, and testimonies, this court hereby declares that all land legally belongs to Ms. Aisha Nansabuga. Furthermore, the attempted manipulation by the developers is noted and fined. The courtroom erupted. Cheers. Tears. Some people knelt in prayer. Aisha covered her mouth, a cry escaping her lips, half laughter, half disbelief. Isaac gently held her arm. Mwana Wanga. Africa stands with you today. She turned and hugged him, not because he was a wealthy man now, but because he was once a freezing beggar who simply needed a shawl to survive one more night. Back to the village, a new beginning. The drive to her village was long, but this time she laughed on the way. Birds flew over the green hills, and children ran behind the car as it entered the village. The moment she stepped out, Villagers clapped, danced, cried. Old Mama K.O.'d placed her trembling hands on Aisha's cheeks. "You are proof that God hides blessings inside struggle." Aisha felt a lump in her throat. She hugged the old woman. "Today, I return as a daughter of this soil." The land that was once nearly stolen now became full of life. People worked together to build new houses, farms, community halls. Aisha used part of the money to create a scholarship fund for village children. She built a clinic with Isaac's help to treat the sick who couldn't afford medicine. What was once a story of betrayal became a story of rebirth. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Aisha sat on the ground, running her fingers through the soil. Isaac approached and sat next to her. For the first time, they didn't talk about courts, money, papers, or battles. They talked about rain, crops, dreams. He asked gently, "Have you forgiven your past?" She looked toward the horizon. "I haven't forgotten it," she said, "but I have made peace with it." Then she added softly, "Forgiveness is not leaving pain behind. It is learning how to walk with it without falling." Isaac's eyes glistened. "And what will you build now?" "Home," she said simply. "Not for me, but for anyone whose kindness has ever been called foolish." A final twist. Weeks later, a letter arrived. No sender's name, but the handwriting looked familiar. Aisha opened it slowly. "Your shawl saved a man. Your kindness saved a village. This is not the end. I have registered a social welfare foundation in your name. From now on, every woman who helps a stranger shall receive support. They will be called Daughters of the Shawl." She covered her mouth. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Children playing nearby heard her crying and ran to hug her. That night, she placed a single candle on her windowsill. Her father used to say, "A candle does not lose light by lighting another candle." Aisha finally understood. She did not lose anything by giving kindness. She only lit another candle. A sacred ending. Years passed. The village became known across Uganda, and beyond, for its unity. Women came from all over Africa to speak about their struggles, land disputes, domestic battles, poverty, injustice, and Aisha listened to every single one of them. One day, a journalist asked her, "How did you become so strong?" She smiled. "I did not become strong. I just refused to stay weak." "But how did you survive so many trials?" he insisted. She looked into the distance and said gently, "Because someone gave me proof that kindness still matters. And sometimes, a single act of kindness becomes the seed of a forest." The journalist looked stunned. Children ran in the background. Drums echoed in the village square. Women prepared food for visitors. The land, her land, was alive. That night, under the African moonlight, she sat outside beneath an acacia tree beside Isaac. Fireflies floated gently like tiny spirits of hope. Without a word, she placed a shawl across his shoulders. He looked at her and smiled. No court, no document, no judge on earth could ever write a judgment stronger than that gesture.